Order 66 is one of the most memorable Star Wars moments. In a quick montage, fans watched as the Jedi Order was stabbed in the back and completely annihilated by the very clone troopers serving under it. In the Star Wars universe, Order 66 was one of the most dramatic power shifts in galactic history, causing the deaths of thousands of Jedi in just a few short hours. But what if we were to tell you that Order 66 and the subsequent Great Jedi Purge actually weren't the worst the Jedi Order endured? What if we were to tell you that the Sith of the Old Republic era destroyed the Jedi Order much more completely?
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
At the start of the Clone Wars, the Jedi Order had about 10,000 members. Thanks to battlefield casualties, Jedi leaving the Order, and General Grievous, this number steadily dropped over the course of the conflict. Then, Order 66 happened. In just 24 hours, the number of Jedi dropped from thousands to just 200. This number decreased even further in the subsequent Great Jedi Purge, which saw Darth Vader and the Inquisitors hunt down and slaughter the surviving Jedi, leaving very few left in the galaxy, and even then, only in hiding. The Great Jedi Purge has another name, the Second Jedi Purge. That's because, obviously enough, this genocide of Jedi wasn't the first of its kind. The first Jedi Purge happened nearly 4,000 years prior during the time of the Old Republic, specifically during the Old Sith Wars. During this first purge, the number of Jedi dropped just as low or possibly even lower than it would later during the Great Jedi Purge. In it, the Sith of the time came even closer than their successors did to completely wiping out the Jedi Order. This begs two questions. How did they accomplish this? And if the first purge was worse, then why was the second one the Great Jedi Purge? The answers to these two questions are intertwined. Firstly, the Sith who carried out the first purge were able to pull this off because the Jedi were already pretty short on numbers. They had just fought 3 galaxy-scale wars in less than 50 years, and their numbers had suffered tremendously for it. Only a few hundred Jedi were left after the end of the Jedi Civil War, the last of these conflicts. Most of the work of killing all the Jedi had already been done by the time of the first purge. The Triumvirate just tried to finish the job. This, incidentally, is why the second purge is the Great Jedi Purge, because it killed way more Jedi. But just because the Great Jedi Purge wins the numbers game doesn't necessarily mean it was worse. Most of its victims were killed by a quick blaster bolt to the back, or many quick blaster bolts to the back if you were Aayla Secura. But even the worst of the Inquisitor's interrogation techniques pale before the horrors unleashed upon the Jedi during the first purge, and during the lead up to it. A quick disclaimer before we proceed. We've already done a video telling the chronological story of this first purge, which if you haven't watched, we highly recommend. We're not going to retell the story of the purge here, rather, we're going to be analysing the methods of the purge and why they were worse than Order 66. It's tricky to decide where the first Jedi Purge began. A lot of the Jedi Order's decline in numbers in this period was the result of a separate set of massacres that happened during the Great Sith War, the Jedi Pogrom, in which Dark Jedi students murdered their masters in a manner not unlike Order 66. Casualties sustained during the Mandalorian Wars also didn't count, but it's during the Jedi Civil War that things get tricky. Sith operations during the Jedi Civil War were technically separate from the first Jedi Purge, but they can be seen as a prelude, as they had the same intentions as, and directly led to the Purge. During his time in command of the Sith Empire, Darth Revan placed a priority of turning as many Jedi to the dark side as possible and killing those who could not be turned. His method of turning Jedi involved breaking them, and his preferred technique to break them was simple in its horrificness: a field trip to Malachor 5. After the end of the Mandalorian Wars, Malachor 5 had become a deeply cursed world, tainted by the atrocities that had taken place there. A dark side nexus lurked deep in the planet, while the screams of the dead swept the planet's surface like wind to those who couldn't feel the Force. The dark side nexus and the wound in the Force left by the Battle of Malachor 5 created a sort of feedback loop, one that echoed across the entire galaxy, corrupting life on an integral level. Naturally, this corruption was at its strongest on Malachor itself. The entire planet was absolutely steeped in a mix of the dark side of the Force and the very absence of the Force. When Revan and his agents captured Jedi, they tended to just fly them to Malachor, drop them off, and leave them for a few days. The torment these Jedi endured was greater than even the worst physical pain. They not only had to contend with the corrupting influence of the dark side at its most overpowering, but also the unending screams of the damned. The result was devastating. Jedi broke very quickly on Malachor. Some fell to the dark side, some died, and some suffered an even worse fate. Some Jedi were consumed by the planet, their very souls becoming extensions of Malachor's corruption. These poor beings became leeches on the Force, bloodhounds perfect for hunting and killing Jedi. They were the ones who carried out the first Jedi Purge. The Jedi Civil War ended with the redemption of Darth Revan and the defeat of his successor, Darth Malak, resulting in the collapse of the Sith Empire. Most of the surviving Sith destroyed themselves in a subsequent civil war, but a few persisted. These Sith regrouped on, you guessed it, Malachor 5, and came under the rule of the Sith Triumvirate, the three most powerful of their number. The members of the Triumvirate were Darth Traya, the Lord of Betrayal, Darth Nihilus, the Lord of Hunger, and Darth Sion, the Lord of Pain. We've done videos on each of these Sith Lords if they interest you. It was the Sith Triumvirate that commanded the Great Jedi Purge, and Sion and Nihilus that did much of the legwork. If you were a Jedi, you didn't want to be killed by either of these two Sith Lords. Nihilus, as you probably know, essentially devoured souls. He would travel to planets where Jedi gathered in groups and consume the Force essences of all life forms on that world, sterilizing entire planets for daring to host Jedi parties. This was a fate worse than death, a process that sucked the very souls out of Jedi that were subjected to it. Darth Sion, on the other hand, preferred to work with his hands, but he was capable of inflicting just as much suffering as his counterpart. Sion liked to turn his victims into mirror images of himself, inflicting tremendous amounts of physical pain upon them and using the Force to keep them alive. Sion's Jedi victims died slowly, often suffering many mortal wounds before finally being allowed to pass into the Force. We'd gladly take a blaster bolt in the back over either of these fates. Darth Sion also commanded those Force bloodhounds we talked about earlier, who he trained as Sith assassins. Using far weaker versions of Nihilus's technique, these assassins fed on the souls of Force sensitives just in much smaller amounts. They were able to detect Force sensitives from across the galaxy and, through the Force, follow their scent. Jedi couldn't evade Sith assassins for long, and to make matters worse, the longer they tried, the more the assassins drained them. Simply trying to survive the first Jedi Purge slowly destroyed your soul unless you were lucky enough that the Sith didn't know you existed or thought you were dead. To make matters worse, the Sith Triumvirate was one of the most effective Sith orders in galactic history. There were effectively only 3 Sith Lords in the galaxy at the time. All of their dark side minions had been essentially turned into mindless drones by Malachor. These Sith Lords, unlike most others in their era, didn't bother building up an empire or battling the Republic. Instead, they fought the Dark Wars, a subtle effort to undermine galactic civilization by wiping out the Jedi. They recognized that government control of the galaxy didn't matter, only the Force mattered and the battle between light and dark. By working from the shadows, they came closer than any other Sith order before them to winning that battle. In fact, they came closer than any other order after as well. All of this horribleness came from a single source, Malachor 5. It was Malachor that turned Jedi into Sith assassins, and it was from Malachor that Sion and Nihilus drew their power, especially Nihilus. The first Jedi Purge and the Dark Wars were less a battle fought between Jedi and Sith than a battle between the Jedi and Malachor, a festering wound in the Force spreading its tendrils across the galaxy, spawning unspeakable horrors to threaten the light side. It's fortunate for Jedi of later generations that Malachor 5 was destroyed at the war's end and the wound within it was cleansed. So that's our look at how the first Jedi Purge was so much worse than Order 66. But what do you think? Would you like to see a full video about Malachor? Let us know all that and more in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you in the next video.